If nothing else, the mission of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum is to use art for drawing connections between different times, places, and cultures. That will be taken to a new level in a special program with performances in music, theater, and dance. And the focus will be on women as agents in the struggle for justice. To tell us about the program is the museum's visiting Curator of Performing Arts, Helga Davis. Thank you very much for being with us, Helga.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I don't want to give away everything at once, but you know, this is a program that draws a connection between a figure in one of those famous paintings at the museum, Lucretia,
yes,
and Sandra Bland, who was in the news a few years ago. What are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about women whose lives were sacrificed for the Republic to help, in the end, ward the Republic against tyranny. And I think it's such a fascinating connection to be making, particularly in this moment where there's now the Me Too movement. And we have these two stories, one of a rape and one of an alleged suicide / murder of two women whose lives were also, and whose deaths were also agents for change. So the Republic of Rome was built after the murder of Lucretia. After the death of Lucretia, the rape of Lucretia, it's all one mush. And the death of Sandra Bland was also a call to action, not just for women, but for all of us who care about
the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, and who care about justice. We hear a lot about the men in this kind of tragedy, but we don't hear the names of the women all the time. And so for me, it was very important to make that connection for myself, for that movement, and to remind people that it isn't just Black men who are in this conversation, but also Black women.
Botticelli painted that painting with Lucretia in Florence at a time when it was being overrun with these sort of puritanical populists. Mm-hmm. And this is a painting that Isabella Stewart Gardner really wanted. It was the first one she got with Bernard Berenson.
It's the first, and it's the first art of that kind in the country.
What do you think it was so special about it for her?
Isabella, for me, and from the bit that I've been learning about her, was also quite the rebel. And I love that perhaps she saw this as an opportunity not only to be the first, to have this piece be the first of its kind in the country, but that it would be through the hands and the work and the resources of a woman that this important artist would be brought back to this country. I don't know so much about whether or not the content of the painting was important for her, but certainly Botticelli as a painter was important for her, and she wanted very much to have a Botticelli, and that she was able to use her resources to bring that to this country, I think is really incredible and says so much about her spirit. And I feel that this programming and my programming for this season works very hard to continue in this conversation of using art as advocacy.
Well, this is not just art in one medium. You're working with a person that you worked for before, Robert Wilson from ART. Maybe people remember him. What's his role going to be in this upcoming series?
Well, Robert Wilson was actually already with us this season. And he came and he performed John Cage's lecture on nothing. And what was so great for me is that I've been working with Bob now for maybe 15 years. And it was great to be on the other side of working with Bob, to bring him somewhere. And what was beautiful about what he did, and we're going to try and find some photographs to post on the Gardner's website, is that he really made Calderwood Hall an object. We brought in and painted by hand a 30 by 30 foot piece of paper with some of the lecture for nothing on top, and that was placed in the center of the hall. And in a way, it acted in the same way that a painting does. So it's not that you are a passive traveler through the space, but that you have an object in the center that draws your attention, that brings you in, that continues to bring you in and see anew the space, to hear something different, because that's also one of Bob's it's a thing that's very important to him, that what you see help you hear, and that what you hear help you see. And then he placed himself in the middle of all of that and began this text that is highly repetitive, but that speaks about how we can be content and find contentment as humans in a space of quiet and stillness.
This is Being in the News, and we're talking with Helga Davis from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Helga, one of the other events going on here is going to be directed at teens. What do you have in mind for that? There is an event, there's some kind of a lecture or something that's going to be aimed at teenagers to bring them into
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was watching the Quincy Jones documentary. And Quincy Jones talked about being 9 years old and going out one day to get a knife so that he could learn how to rob people. And when you think about the contribution that Quincy Jones has made to music, it's completely absurd that he would be thinking such a thing. But what he said after that is that you want to be what you see. And one of the things that I feel very fortunate about is that I grew up with a music teacher who said to me, all music is your music. And so on Saturdays, I learned Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, and then on Sundays, I went to church. And what I wanted to do with this particular program is that we're having a cellist who is African American. His name is Kari Joyner. He's also a professor at Juilliard, and he's an extraordinary cellist. And so I thought it would be great to have a day where kids come, they learn about that instrument, they hear him speak, and then later on in the evening, he'll give a performance inside the garden, inside the Gardner. But he'll also perform, and more of a lecture demonstration aimed at teens, and just for the opportunity to see.
I'd love to hear what it sounds like. I've been in the Calderwood Hall, but this ought to be something. We should mention, Helga, if people want some more details about when these different things are happening, what's the best way to find out?
I think they can go on to the Gardner website, which is Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.org.
Right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Helga Davis from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.